Hello and welcome to the place to be. No, not here, there, because that's the Hyundai Venue, the brand's newest and smallest SUV, and so named because, according to its makers, the Venue is the place to be. Now, with the accent not long for this world, the Venue will soon form the entry point to the Hyundai family, along with the cheapest i30 model at just under 20 grand. So, the place to be, huh? The only question now, of course, is, are they right? But first, please do click subscribe to stay on top of all our latest videos. As always, there's a test coming at the end of the year, so you don't want to miss any. And for all the details, please go to carsguide.com.au to read my full review.
The Venue might well start at a touch under 20 grand, but it still represents a sizable step up from the cheapest Accent, which, as it enters its final months on sale, you can still pick up for around 15 grand. Happily for Hyundai though, the Venue is also a literal step up from the Accent, and so places the brand's newest and smallest SUV into a fast-growing segment. And while that won't make up entirely for the Accent's soon-to-be missing sales volume, it will help. The Venue arrives in 3 trim levels: the Go, the Active and the Elite, and by Hyundai's own admission, not many people will land on the Go, which arrives with niceties like an 8-inch touchscreen that's Apple CarPlay and Android Auto equipped, but also makes do with 15-inch steel wheels. The step up to the Active trim is $1,500, and it's one Hyundai thinks most people will happily make. Doing so earns you 15-inch alloys, LED DRLs, a nicer interior treatment, and a better 6-speaker stereo. While both the Go and the Active can be had with manual or automatic transmissions, the Elite is auto only and also raids the very best of the equipment list.
We are sitting at the very top of the Venue tree here in the Elite trim level, which predictably gets the very best of the equipment list inside and out. So the alloy wheels are 17 inches, for example, and actually this 8-inch screen is standard across the range, but here in the Elite it gets navigation and digital radio, as well as Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, of course. The air conditioning here is now single zone climate control, there's an extra USB charge point, and finally, this kind of metallic look trimmings also help lift the ambience in the cabin a little bit too. But of course, every silver lining has a cloud, and in a car this size, it usually occurs right there in the back seat. So let's get back there and check out the space.
It's worth remembering that while the Venue feels more substantial than the Accent it essentially replaces, it is actually slightly shorter and it rides on a smaller wheelbase, so it's no behemoth. Clever packaging unlocks a usable 355-litre boot space, but that is slightly smaller than you'd find in the Accent and lower than the 361 litres on offer in the Kona.
Now look, at 175 centimetres, I'm unlikely to be drafted to the NBA anytime soon. But I got to say, for someone my height, there's actually a bit of room back here. As you can see, a little bit of knee room, a little bit of headroom, and while you could never, ever get 5 adults across the back here, I reckon you could fit 4 adults my height in relative comfort. But the bigger issue back here is just the lack of stuff. This is the top spec Elite car. There's no air vents, no power outlets, no USB charge points, no cup holders, no pull down dividers, just these tiny little pockets in the doors. One other issue, plenty of hard plastics.
It's a pretty straightforward engine lineup in the Venue, and that's mostly because there's exactly one engine on offer, no matter how much you spend. It's a 1.6 litre petrol unit, good for 90 kilowatts and 151 newton meters. Happily, it accepts cheaper 91 RON fuel and should sip around 7 litres per 100 kilometres on the combined cycle. That engine can be paired with a 6-speed manual transmission in the Go and Active trims, or with a 6-speed automatic in the Go, Active or the Elite. The Venue also gets a tricky traction system that, using throttle mapping and ESC settings, can be configured for mud, sand or snow. A true off-roader this front-wheel drive SUV ain't, but some light stuff should be possible. 6 airbags, AEB, a reversing camera and lane keep assist are standard right across the range.
There's actually probably 2 ways to look at the drive experience of the Venue. The first is in the circumstances that it's most likely to actually be used, and that is in the city. If you're really gentle with it, if you're pottering around at slow speeds, just getting up to 50, 60, 70 kilometers an hour, it's actually really quiet, really smooth, the gearbox works really nicely, and it does all that stuff pretty much faultlessly. And let's face it, that is the natural habitat for this car. But the other way to look at it is out here on these country roads, and it's here where some of the engineering does tend to fall down just a little bit. Remember, that's a pretty small engine. It makes 90 kilowatts and 151 newton meters, and those aren't big numbers. That power is fed through a 6-speed automatic gearbox. You can option a manual, of course, in the cheaper cars, but let's face it, absolutely nobody is going to do that. And it just means that when you're out here and you really plant your foot, it can sound a little bit thrashy. It feels like the gearbox is working really hard. If you're climbing hills, you'll find the gearbox is changing between 3rd and 4th or 4th and 5th, trying to work out the best gear to be in, none of which adds up to the smoothest, quietest drive experience. But again, I think that's probably being a little bit unfair on this car. Let's face it, how often is it going to do cross-country trips? Almost never. This is a city-focused SUV in its purest sense, and in the city, it does everything it's told to do, and it does it really well. The other really surprising thing about this car is that the steering, the suspension, it all feels really, really, really well sorted, surprisingly well sorted. The steering's nice and direct. You sit high in this car, but not high enough that you get that sort of tall ship waving when you're going around corners. It feels quite composed and quite planted. It's definitely not a sports car, obviously, and the front tires will whine and scream if you put too much pressure on them. That kind of goes without saying in this class. But it does actually handle twisty roads really well, even if there isn't a huge amount of power under your right foot to pull you out the other end. But I gotta say, I totally get the sales pitch here. It's a light car that isn't. It's an accent that's more modern feeling, newer, crucially taller, better ride height, and yes, more expensive, but not so expensive that it's gonna alienate customers. At least I don't think so. So I do totally understand what they're trying to do. Now, we've covered a lot of kilometers in this thing today, hundreds of kilometers in fact, and it's done it all with real ease, and it's left me feeling pretty impressed by it, and even surprisingly impressed by its dynamic prowess, even if there's not a huge amount of power to back it up. But remember, you've got to put this thing in the context in which it's designed for. You won't see too many of these out here, surely not. You'll see the vast majority of them in the city, or if Hyundai's marketing team is to be believed, mostly parked at a lawn bowls club, as the target market is 55 and over. But still, in the city, it makes a whole heap of sense. It is a modern accent, only better and more expensive, but crucially better. Whether it really is the place to be is up to you, but one thing is certain, with SUVs still selling like high-riding hotcakes, the Venue is the right car at the right time for Hyundai. Now look, I really don't want to go on about this, but have you hit subscribe yet? Please, don't make me ask again.